Evening, everyone. Welcome to the launch of Mina and the Undead. We are two vampires joining you this evening. I myself am the Crypt Master, Dawn Kurtagich, and I'm joined by Amy McCaw, our female Dracula. Because I can't see with these fabulous things on, I shall take them off. Before we start, some housekeeping. So, number one, there is a chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Feel free to chat to each other while we have this discussion. If you'd like to ask a question, there's also a little ask a question box. You can do that anytime throughout the chat. And at the end, Amy will be answering some. There's also a poll section. There are 8 polls just for you guys to take for fun, where you can choose your favorites of different categories. 20 people are going to win bracelets today. The winners are going to be announced in the chat by Charlotte. So while we're talking, do look over there and look out for your name. You might have won. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of Amy's book, Mina and the Undead, or one of mine, you can click the Buy the Book button at the bottom. And these are for UK copies. But if you request a quote from the bookstore, they can ship to the States, or you can try Book Depository. So, I'm Dawn Kurtagich, horror author and vampire fiend, if you couldn't tell. And I'm joined by Amy McCaw, and we are celebrating the launch of Mina and the Undead, her debut novel. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. So excited. That's why I'm reading like this. Yeah, it's very surreal to be here with you, actually. Dawn probably doesn't remember, but I met Dawn as a fan at Comic-Con years and years ago. And I brought it here, the copy that Dawn signed for me of Creeper Man.
Wow!
So, it's amazing, really, to think that now I'm here. I'm going to show you what you wrote, Dawn. So, to Amy, I loved meeting you. So, it's just taking a moment. I'm so happy to be here with you, interviewing me. So, thank you so much for doing this.
That has just literally made my day. I just imagine the future when both of us are like 80 and some 18-year-old kid is like, I've been reading you since I was in my nappies. We're like, wow, I feel old. Okay, so first, why don't you tell us about Mina? Tell us a bit about the book.
Okay, I'll just show you the amazing cover first that Becky at UCLan did a brilliant job. So the 90s theme cover. So Mina and the Undead is a gothic YA horror set in 1995 New Orleans, and Mina goes to visit her sister for the yearly vampire festival, and they become estranged over the past year, so she's hoping to reconnect with her sister and have loads of fun with all the creepy things New Orleans has to offer. So she gets a job in a horror movie haunted mansion with her sister, and they enjoy scaring the tourist. They're just starting to reconnect, and then Mina finds a dead body at work. So somebody is killing people in the style of New Orleans myths, and Mina has to figure out what's going on before she becomes the next victim.
Oh, it's so good. If you guys haven't read it yet, it's excellent. Well, I mean, it looks like 90s vampire culture is an obsession for both of us.
It is, yeah.
What is it about the 90s do you think that's so addictive, and why did you decide to set Mina in that time period?
It's an interesting one because I was young in the 90s, so I was a teen in like late 90s and early 2000s. So for me, there's that amazing nostalgia that the things that I still love now, like Buffy and Point Horror and Interview with the Vampire, I first discovered them in the 90s. But then there's lots of people who, and I've been doing challenges for Mina and the Undead online, saying, I've never heard of Point Horror. I've never heard of some of the things. I know. I've never heard of some of the things that you reference in the book, but I still love it. And I think there's something about those 90s vampires are just really appealing. So the 90s itself with, you know, the clothes, the music, the amazing films. But those 90s vampires, like you've got things like, you know, the Vampire Diaries, True Blood, I think was early 2000s, Into the Vampire, the movie. They had this great balance, 90s vampires, of being scary, sexy. They're not the kind of old school horror vampires, and they're not the new, really polished vampires. They're this sort of gritty in between. And that was the kind of vampires I love and want to write as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's like they were a stepping stone, and they were fun and sexy, like you said. And well, I mean, there are so many pop references in the book. You know, The Crow, which I love. I was obsessed with Brandon Lee, and when I found out he passed away, I went into mourning. It's got, you know, The Crow, Interview with the Vampire. It's got Buffy. What were some of your 90s go-to pop culture favorites as a teen?
I'm really sorry how many times I'm going to say the word Buffy in this. So Buffy, in
Are
case
you
you can't...
forgiven?
I know, in this company, I know that you'll forgive me mentioning Buffy, but it had such a big impact on me when I think it came out when I was about 12 or 13, and it just tapped into something that I was fascinated by. The vampires, the writing is just brilliant, and I still love Buffy now. So I think that was one of my favourite things in the 90s. But also there were certain films that I would get obsessed with the film and just watch it compulsively over and over again. So I think Clueless was one where I can still recite it almost from the first line to the end, and I can sing the songs in between. And I would just rewatch a film and like weeks and weeks on end. And then the other ones were The Faculty. I don't know whether you've seen that, Dawn, but
I did, yeah.
Oh god, it's so good. If anybody hasn't watched it, it's a group of teenagers realise that aliens are trying to take over the world, and they are doing it through taking over their teachers at school. And it's just really scary.
Classic
And
90s.
It's scary, sexy, and a bit silly. It is like the perfect 90s. And then another one, The Craft, I feel like you might appreciate, Dawn.
Yes.
I just want to, like, I don't necessarily want to be them. I want to dress like them. And I just loved how it explores power in a really interesting way, and how power can corrupt you. And I think for a witch film, it's just the best. And then for a non-supernatural one, Cruel Intentions, I was so obsessed with. I saw it at the cinema, I think, 3 or 4 times. There's just so many things about it. The cast, like Sarah Michelle Gellar, Ryan Philippe, Reese Witherspoon, Selma Blair. And it's just, I don't know, I think for a lot of teenagers, it taught us a lot of things about a lot of things. And it's just really, it's sexy, it's fun, it's twisty. And I think that was one that I probably watched more than any other in my mid-teens.
I think it explains a lot about us if you had 90s childhoods.
Yeah. How about you?
I'm the same. Yeah, I had the same. You know, I had The Crow, I had Clueless, I had all of them. But for me, my absolute all-time favorite was Xena. And there was a great episode where Bacchus, the god of wine and revelry, appeared, and they portrayed him as a vampire, and he had these females that he would then bite, and they would become these vampires. And at the time, I thought it was just the coolest thing. And Xena, for me, you know, it had Greek mythology, it had vampires, it had witches, it had all kinds of, you know, all the typical 90s things, plus a musical episode. Just like Buffy, who doesn't love a good musical episode?
I don't remember that. I feel like I'm missing out.
So
Did you ever play? I had the Xena game. Did you ever play that?
Yes, of course I did. I've got all the Xena comics. The only thing I don't have is a Xena outfit, but I will, and I shall have a chakram with it as well.
Okay, real life event, the one that we managed to do together. You need to dress as Xena.
Oh hell yeah! Oh hell yeah! We're doing that.
Yeah, do it.
Yelk, anyone? Let's vote that they let us have Yelk this year. All right, okay, so show us, if you have any, some of your favorite vampire merchandise.
Okay, so you can probably see from the room behind me, there's quite a few things. Like there are a few, like there's a vampire skeleton jack somewhere, which Cynthia Murphy bought me. Thank you, Cynthia. But so there's something that I wanted to show you. I've just shown you a little bit of his head. So this is a Spike puppet, in case you couldn't tell.
I love Spike.
I feel like it requires some explanation. So there's an episode of Angel called Smile Time where Angel is turned into a puppet, and it's my favourite episode of Angel of all time, and I've watched it thousands of times. But there isn't a Spike puppet in it, and this company decided to make a Spike puppet, and look how cute he is with the long coat.
He's amazing.
And the little shoes.
You have to operate him, can you?
Sadly not. You can apparently operate the Angel, but I didn't really want to put my hand inside a puppet on screen. I thought it might be a bit ludicrous. So yeah, just pretend that I'm operating Spike. So there you go. That's probably my favourite. I think it's about 20 years old. It's just my favourite vampire thing that I own. I'm going to sit him here with
Spike
me.
forever. You have to tell everyone what you received as a launch present from James Master.
So this morning, my husband shouted me, and of course I was busy, and he's like, you need to come downstairs right now. So I come downstairs, still dressing myself, and he's on the phone with my friend Shell. And they told me to go on Twitter, so I did, and they both bought me videos from James Masters, who plays Spike, wishing me a happy launch day, talking about my book and about being a writer, and actually giving great advice about being a writer and how it feels when something, because I suppose an actor is similar, when you create something and it goes out into the world, it makes you feel quite vulnerable, but it's amazing if it works. And so I've got these 2 great videos from one of my idols, which 2 of my friend and husband got for me, independently of each other. So they didn't even realise. They know me very well.
That's what we call kismet. Absolutely serendipitous. I love that. All right, well, did you have any 90s movies that inspired you? Name your top 3 favorites.
Okay, so there are vampire films and then there are horror ones. And I think the horror ones are all quite similar. So we've got Urban Legend and Scream. And I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I think Urban Legend, thinking about it, has got some elements similar to mine, where people are being killed in the style of urban legends as opposed to New Orleans myths. But I just like those 3 films that they're really twisty. There's so many clues and red herrings, and you really don't know who did it. And I certainly didn't until the very last moment. And I think that I just tried to pull a lot of that into my books. Like I want twists, and I want that uncertainty about all the characters and not knowing who to trust. Vampire films wise, it's got to be The Lost Boys is my favourite vampire film. I put it in the poll, so I hope it's winning. But yeah, I just think Lost Boys is really fun and a bit silly, but also dark. I really love the Buffy the Vampire Slayer film, even though it's a little bit terrible and dated. It's just nostalgic for me. I know. And Into the Vampire is, again, not an easy film to watch in some places. It's quite dark and a bit hard going. I just really love it. And I think that, surprisingly, beautiful. Tom Cruise is a really good Lestat. Who knew that he had that range? Good. I know.
Yeah.
And I think that Brad Pitt, he's one of my favourites anyway. But as Louis, he is like particularly mournful and sorrowful, and and he looks really
absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
How about you?
Styling.
Yeah,
the vampire styling in that film was insanely good, and the music. Well, apart from Interview with a Vampire, my top 3 vampire films are Byzantium, Only Love Is Left Alive. I know they're not 90 films, but it's fine. And What We Do in the Shadows. Those are my 3 top vampire films. 90s films, I'd have to give it some thought. Probably The Craft is one of them, but I'm not sure. I have a weird thing with favorites. I have like too many to single down, but I'm creating lists, so I have to refer to them.
This is why I wrote the book.
I know that
I just found all of my favorite things into it. So if you want to know what my favorite songs are, films, just check out the book.
It's chock-a-block, you guys. It's so full. I love it. Well, I know that you're a big point horror fan. Did those books also inspire some of the writing and the style? Because there's this like fun, rompy side of Mina. Was it a little bit inspired by that?
Do you know, it's really interesting. Some of my favourite recent books, like Good Girls Die First and Last One to Die, have been billed as like point horror for a new generation. And people start saying that about my book. And I did not intentionally do that at all. And people started saying it as I read it and as they read the early copies. And I realised that I just wanted to tell a book that was full of things that I loved. I wanted this fun, twisty, pacey YA horror, because until quite recently, there have been some great ones like the Red Eye books and the ones I just mentioned, and your books, obviously, Dawn, and Harrow Lake by Kel is amazing. But I felt like there was a period between the 90s and the early 2000s where it kind of went a little bit quiet for that fun, twisty. I think horror got either quite serious or non-existent, and I kind of wanted to fill that little gap. And there's lots of them now, which is great.
Yeah, I love that. You feel safe in them, which I love. But there are nods to sort of more traditionally serious sort of vampire books in Mina. You've got this nod to Dracula because of the mention of Whitby, where Mina's from, and then you've obviously got the nod to Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire because she goes to New Orleans. Tell me more about the connections that those 2 books sort of have a role in Mina.
I think, without giving too much away, vampires are really central to the lives of the characters, and I liked the idea that Mina and Libby are both named after one a historical presumed vampire and one a vampire character. So I just really wanted to play on that through the book, and I did that in 2 ways really. I think I wanted to include lots of vampire references, so people like Dawn spend the whole book picking out, is that a Buffy reference? And some of them are really explicit, and some of them are as simple as a song that's playing in a bar. And I think one person, Georgia Bowers, who's got a book coming out this year, she's the only person who messaged me and said, I know which Buffy episode you stole that song from. I was like, yes, I did. I was waiting for somebody. It's Transylvanian Concubine, and it's by Rasputina. And so in my book, Rasputina are playing in the bar, but slight spoiler, but there you go. It's a good one to
love that. When you have a pub quiz night where you have all these like questions about the hidden content in this novel.
It's amazing. And some of the people that I didn't realize, like I've got friends who write these like lovely middle grade books that are sort of like really gentle adventures, and they were the ones who were picking out the really dark vampire references. So I did that really intentionally. I wanted to make lots of references and for them to be meaningful to the plot. And also I wanted to play with vampire tropes, and some of them I wanted to lean into, some of them I kind of tried to go against and sort of flip them on the heads a little bit. And hopefully if I get to write a sequel, that will be something that I will go into a little bit more.
Oh, I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that.
Me too.
I know you've been to New Orleans before.
Yeah.
I saw that in an interview once. What were some of the things about your trip that influenced you and inspired you for Mina? Because it felt so real. I felt like I could smell New Orleans when I read the book.
Thank you. I think it is one of those places, like, you know, some cities you go to and they can be anywhere in the world and they're just bland and they don't have something cohesive that pulls them together. And New Orleans just has a smell for one thing, and in some places the smell is not great because it's something to do with the sewers and the swamps and things. But like the food smells amazing. Like people are walking down Bourbon Street and spilling drinks that smell like fruit, and it's just this amazing sensory overload. So I think there's that side of it that I wanted to bring into the book. And then there's also so many creepy locations, like the tombs that you see on American films. Like you can't, unfortunately, now go on your own, but you used to be able to wander this amazing cemetery, and called St. Louis Cemetery. Now you can go with a tour guide because it's quite dangerous, the area that it's in, I think. As we discovered when we were there, and we met an interesting character, but I'll not tell that story just now. But yeah, so I think that we visited so many cool, creepy locations. So I planted those in the book and I found them really inspiring. And the plot ended up spinning around them. And then there's the element of the myths too. Like a lot of the locations, like you'll walk past a building that looks terrifying. And if you stop and look at it, somebody will be there ready to tell you, did you know that that's where Delphine LaLaurie lived? And if anyone's watched American Horror Story, I referenced that in the book, and there's a whole American Horror Story slant to that. And I just found it interesting that a lot of people in New Orleans and, you know, all over the place believe that these things happened, and some of them are grounded in fact. They're in the newspaper, and some of them are just stories that have become part of the fabric of the place, and nobody knows if they happened or not. And one of the main myths that informs this book, people tell you, people from New Orleans that I've spoken to about it are convinced that it happened, but there is no historical grounding. It's just a story that's been passed through, which I won't say what, but it's a story for the 1930s. And so the fact that over 90 years people potentially have been telling this story, I really wanted to play on that. This blending between fact and fiction, I think, is fascinating. And you don't get that many places like that are so steeped in fiction and fact blurring the lines.
Yeah, I love the fact that there's an oral tradition of almost New Orleanian urban legends that are passed down as sort of fact. How fascinating. Well, I really hope that you write a sequel because I want more of that.
Thank you. I could talk about it all night, definitely.
We have to have a panel just on that.
Yeah, please.
You should just come to Wales and we'll have a cuppa and we'll just discuss this by the light of a single candle and hope that it doesn't blow out.
Brilliant.
I was thinking about the relationship between Mina and her sister Libby. There's this undercurrent of tension between them. They have a really nuanced and complex relationship it's tense between them in the beginning of the novel, and that gradually is complicated by what's going on. Firstly, are you a sibling? And secondly, how did you go about writing the sibling aspect of the novel? And was it always going to be a sister story?
So I am a sibling, but I have two brothers, and my relationship with them is great. There's no undercurrent of tension. You know, whatever they would tell you, we get on really well. And I think when I first started writing the book, there was no Libby, and I found it the other day from 2016, the notes that I wrote. And it was very basic. It's like, Mina goes to New Orleans. Why? And I was trying to think out reasons. You know, I knew that I wanted her to be from Yorkshire like me, and I wanted her to go and have this amazing experience that is tainted by murder and vampire stories and the rest of it. But Libby wasn't there, and I think as soon as I figured out that she needed this kind of, not exactly an antagonist, but somebody who will challenge her and her decisions, and that has a lot of history that they needed to be resolved. As soon as I thought she needed a sister, I decided what her name was going to be, because I thought of this great vampire she could be named after. And Libby, I don't know whether you've had this, Dawn, where I just had this moment where she just came, like, I knew everything about her. And it's so rare for me because I have to quite often tease ideas out, like I'm pulling out my own teeth or something. I know, maybe not quite that graphic, but Libby, like, I knew that she had a girlfriend, and it took me a while to name her, but I could picture this girl in my head that lived in New Orleans. And I found Della in the end, which is based on the name Delphine, that quite a lot of people in the South have. Libby just felt really real to me straight away. Some of the other characters needed more work, but Libby, I just knew that she was this slightly difficult but really likable person who kind of is very different from Mina, but they have a lot that ties them together as well. And I wanted to explore that in the book and see how their relationship would change over the course of the book as well.
I love Libby and I love Della as well. The two of them together was so cute. They were girlfriend goals. Libby felt really real to me. So it's interesting that you said that she just sort of came to you. Fascinating. I want to go and reread that now, knowing what you've just told me. All right, now for a bit of fun.
Okay.
Tell me about your 3 favorite horror tropes, and then I'll tell you mine.
So I have to admit, Dawn sent me these questions in advance, so I had time to think about it. But when I saw that question, I just absolutely froze. And I love horror, but I thought, what tropes do I actually like? I've explored loads of them in the book, but quite often horror tropes annoy me. So the girl running up the stairs, I'm just sitting there like, please don't. God, there's a door. Go out of the door. And I'm that person who sits there like,
what is that?
So a lot of horror tropes I think I find quite innately annoying, and some of them are, quite misogynistic as well, that, the woman doesn't make very good decisions. So I thought ones that I really like, it turned out I've used in my book. So one I haven't used is The Masked Killer. I think is really cool and something I would maybe like to write about. The fact that you see glimpses of this figure and you don't know who they are, and you start trying to match them up to the characters. And, the main character has brushes with them like in Scream, but you don't get to see who they are until the big reveal. I love that. So the 2 that I've explored quite a bit in the book are, I really like twists. And I know some people find plot twists annoying. But I
love them.
I like seeding a twist through a book and then pulling the rug out from under you. I really enjoy to watch that, as long as it's done well, and to write it. And then the other one, I'm just completely blanking. Oh, that was it. I'm looking at my list now. I have made notes. So, that's it.
We like notes.
I know. I have to have notes. I'm such a note person. So having lots of suspects, I think, is really fun too. Those where it's a room, somebody's died, it's a closed location, they're on an island, who'd done it.
Yeah.
I think that's really fun. And to some extent, I tried to do that. Obviously, they're not in that closed confines, but I still wanted to plant seeds of doubt with certain characters, and I hope I succeeded. So I enjoy watching that again, reading it and writing it.
Yeah,
and do you have any favorite tropes
like that? Oh, yeah, I chose 3 as well, but with Mina, it did feel like a closed set almost. It had that sort of feeling of a cozy whodunit. I've just realized that's kind of, it had this comforting feeling where, like, it's someone there. I didn't realize that till now. That's so interesting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, okay, so my 3 tropes I also tend to use in my horror. The first one is the abandoned house / ruin / castle that they go in to explore. I mean, of course, I've got the dead house, I've got another haunted house, and then I've got a haunted mill. So of course I
feel like that is one I would actually do. Like some of the others, like running up the stairs, I wouldn't do, but I would. If you said to me that house is haunted, go in it, I would.
I'd make you go in front of me.
Like, have you been to Edinburgh? The Edinburgh Vaults are supposed to be a really haunted place, and
I really want to go.
We went for my dad's birthday, and he said, "What do you want to do? Choose something." I'm like, "Right, we're going on a ghost tour of the Edinburgh Vaults. Surprise!" And they did all enjoy it. They all enjoyed the history, but of course, I'm there edging to the edge of the group, like trying to find a dark place to stand in and like see if I could really scare myself. So sorry, I just
feel something.
I commandeered your answer there, Dawn, but that is just, I really
great.
love that.
I love that. Well, I want to go to the vault, and then I'll have to look for orbs with my flashlight. The second trope, the second one for me is the vengeful spirit. I love the idea of something wrongfully happening to a person, and that creating a vengeful energy, and that, like, the sort of curse thing that happens a lot in Asian horror, and I love it. And the third one is what's called the Afterlife Express, which is the idea that you have something ordinary that has one little thing wrong with it that makes it creepy or supernatural. And it comes from the idea that you've got someone sitting on the train platform and a train pulls in, but it's completely empty and it's supposed to be rush hour, and there's something eerie and odd about it. So I love those three. I want to play with the last one a bit more, actually, because I love, sometimes when you're sitting in a room and just something feels discordantly wrong, that creeps me out. I want to play with that a bit more.
Yeah, I like that. It's that physical sensation, isn't it, where you feel something and you can almost see, like you see a shape. I think my imagination quite often carries me away. So if I get up at night, I see shadows and I see my reflection start to like scare myself. Maybe that's why I like to write.
People.
Oh, of course. Did they come out of the mirror and
get?
I don't know that I do. No, tell me.
Well, it's this idea that when you see a shadow, you think you see a shadow. There are actually shadow people there, and you're not alone.
Oh, good.
It's creepy, right? It's creepy.
That is. Write about it, Dawn, please.
I know. And the thing is, I will. Trust me. You will always get creepy from me. But the thing is, I'm always looking for creepy books. And there aren't actually that many that really, truly scare me. Show me your favorite spooky book.
Oh, I haven't actually prepared this, Dawn. So I'm listening to...
Or merchandise. Anything that you have spooky around you.
I showed this, Joy. I just have to hand. One thing that I did bring back from New Orleans with me, I showed this in Cynthia's launch, and it happens to still be sitting on my desk, like looking ominously at me.
I love it. Does it have a name?
Actually, no. She's just she is
Amy
she's a doll.
Needs a name.
No, she's a doll for attraction, but I bought her because I like the colour of her hair. There was nothing else going on there. But I like creepy objects, as you can maybe see from my room, that have sort of a cute edge to them. So I think that's why I like Nightmare Before Christmas. I really like this voodoo doll. I hope she doesn't work. I'm going to put her down. But I think you can see I've got some is it Tokyo Pop? I think the little monkey that's a bit of a skeleton.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I think maybe that sort of filters into my horror as well. I read your books if I want to be really terrified, and I think maybe people can read mine if they want to have some little shocks and maybe some scares, but nothing that's going to haunt them in their sleep. But my favourite recent scary, I do. But at the minute, I'm listening to Teeth in the Mist, which is Dawn's most recent book, and if you haven't read it, I would recommend the audio version. Is so good, and I think that spooky books wise, your books are right at the top of my list. If I want to really scare myself, Teeth in the Mist, it's gradually building and putting things in. And like you said, that feeling of wrongness that you really like exploring, it kind of makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable from the beginning. And as you start to realize why you're uncomfortable, it's too late and it's got you. And I really like that. So yeah, I definitely recommend that. And I remember when I met you, Dawn, you recommended House of Leaves as a really scary book, and I still have that on my shelf sort of glaring at me, but I haven't quite got in the mood to read it yet, and it's huge. It's about this thick, but
some of the pages have almost nothing on them.
Oh, maybe I can read it a bit more quickly than I thought then. I'm always a bit intimidated by a really thick book.
Yeah, it's one of those ergodic fiction sort of format books that I love and was hugely influential for me, but it's also a book that you have to devote a bit of time to, and if you make the effort, it's very worth it. Someone told me once that once I started reading that book, at one point, I would regret it. And I was sitting in my bed reading it in the house I used to live in, and it faced a long corridor, and the corridor was dark. And I remember I reached this moment in the book, and I looked up, and I was faced with this dark corridor, and I just thought, sugar, I regret this. My perception of reality was altered in that moment. It was so bizarre. But you guys, if you have favorite scary books, put them in the chat because I'm going to review them. I'm going to read some of them because I'm always looking for scary books, and even fun, rompy scary books. I'm also looking for those always.
I just thought, as you were saying that, I think some of the best, if you want in the really scary horror, the ones that start to filter into your life are just amazing, and I like that feel. I know some people don't like that feeling of not being safe. But I really like that. And one that did that for me, I was reading Frozen Charlotte when I was on holiday.
Oh, I read that recently. I literally just finished that.
It's so good. It's one of my favourites. And I don't know if anyone knows about Frozen Charlotte, but basically they're these dolls that people actually used to buy for children, which were dead dolls in tiny box coffins. And as if that's not scary enough, in Alex Bell's amazing book, they come to life. And I was reading this book when I went on holiday to Portugal, and there are these brilliant caves in Sintra underneath, like on the site of a Gothic mansion. You would love it, Dawn. It's amazing. But I was in these caves and I just kept seeing flickers of movement, and all I could think was tiny dead dolls after me. And I know that it's completely illogical, but because the book is so well written and I was in such a vulnerable place, I think if horror can do something to you physically in the moment, then it's done its job. And I just think that that's a really good thing. I'm going to try and do that a little bit more maybe. And I don't think this series is the place to do that, but I would love to write something that really gets under your skin and kind of messes with your head like you do, Dawn.
I hope you do. We need to do that together. You can bring the fun, rompy side. I'll bring the sinister side. We'll chat afterwards.
Did everybody hear that? Me and Dawn are writing a book together, exclusive.
Seriously though, Frozen Charlotte, I would have been imagining dolls as well, and I'd be listening for the whispers of these dolls trying to influence me to like stab somebody's eye out. Or that's a good book. You guys should read that.
Yeah, do it.
Well, tell me a little bit about, because I actually don't know the story behind this. Tell me about Mina's journey to publication.
Okay, so it was long, as is often the case. I think you see a lot online, don't you, about people who got really quick book deals, and that wasn't for me. So I went to New Orleans in 2012, and I knew I wanted to write a book, and I actually tried. As soon as I got home, I started writing this book about a girl who was a fortune teller and worked in this haunted mansion, and there were all these myths. But I just, if you've had an idea before, Dawn, I'm sure, where it just like it fizzles out, and you just don't know what to do with it. Yeah. And a few years later, in 2016, I started thinking about, well, why isn't it a girl going to New Orleans that's like me who went to New Orleans? So I put myself into a little bit and thought, how can I make this a YA? How can I write the kind of fun, scary, twisty, but fairly light and safe book that I want to read? And I think that from 2016, that was it. And I started writing. And then in 2018, I got on a program called Write Mentor, which if anybody is thinking about getting a book published, and I finished it, it was amazing. They helped me, my mentor, Marissa Noel, she essentially whipped my book into shape with me working on the editors. So after that, it did speed up a little bit because I got an agent pretty quickly. We went on submission, I think maybe 6 months later, once I'd done another like brutal round of edits. That's the theme, brutal rounds of edits. And then my book deal, by a lot of standards, was pretty quick. I think it only took a couple of months to get the offer, and then a little bit longer to sign the contract and things. So the book has been 9 years in the making from that first idea in 2012.
That's amazing.
And I
think what, that deserves a round of applause.
Thanks. It's really been a long haul. And I think from now that I've found my footing in what I want to write, I've tried to write other things, and this just feels like my niche. And I don't know why I didn't find it until now, but I tried writing a dystopian. I tried writing something that was a bit more sci-fi. And this just feels like the groove when I'm writing. It feels really like satisfying, and it has all the things in. And you look at the room behind me and you wonder, why didn't you do this sooner? I don't know. Like all the
Sometimes
90s themes are there.
Too close.
Sometimes
you're too close to see it. Yeah. These things take time. Creativity takes time. You can't really rush things as much as you want to.
No, and I think... Sorry, I was just going to say that like when I started writing in my early 20s, I think some people are completely ready to write a book then, but I just wasn't in the right headspace. I was teaching, and it was like sapping a lot of my strength. I don't know how people write books and teach. I think you're amazing people. But I think I needed a little bit of time to grow as a writer and to develop. I didn't have that innate ability, I don't think, in my early 20s that some people have.
Yeah, so being an author wasn't something that you wanted to do since you were like 5 then?
Yeah, I mean, is the weird thing. Like, I think from about 5 or 6, I didn't realise that people wrote books, I just thought that they materialised. And my mum, I remember her talking to me about Enid Blyton is a person who wrote these books. And I was like, well, I want to do that too. And I think it'd always been there, that desire to be an author. And I remember an author called Jean Yor came into school, and I still remember her asking who wants to be an author. And I was the only kid in a room of like however many, 50 kids or something, who put my hand up. But I just don't think I had the confidence. I did try and get an agent before. I think I got my agent when I was in my early 30s, mid-30s. Oh, God, I'm losing track. Maybe when I was 33 or something. I tried probably in my late 20s, but I just don't think that I was ready to do it. I'd written a lot, probably from my mid-20s. I'd written things, but I think I haven't had any formal writing training or anything or studied it. I just needed to practice and grow and find the groove of what I wanted to write. So I think I always knew I wanted to do it, but I was kind of patient, but also didn't quite feel ready to do what I've done now.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something in our culture about this desire to do things young, young, young. And if you don't do something before you're 30, then you're just a failure. And I think it's really toxic. I read an article recently, I think it was in The Guardian, about people that had done things for the first time really old. There was this author, I think she debuted at like 79 or something.
Oh, wow.
And I think The Firekeeper's Daughter just came out and is a #1 New York Times bestseller, and the author is 55. So, this idea that you have to rush or know right away, I think is just silly. Um, Tell me a bit about your writing process. Are you a pantser, a plotter? What does writing look like for you?
I'm both. And my writing process is a bit laborious. I won't recommend anybody does this. But I tend to be a little bit slow, as you can tell from having an idea in 2012 that is being published this year. I find that I need ideas to kind of simmer in my head. Like the book that I'm working on now, I found a first note from 2018, I think, of wanting to write this book, and I'm just now ready to write it. So maybe the book I write next will be one I thought of in 2020 or something. So I think I do need time for a story to simmer in my head, and I often talk to people about the ideas. I've got critique partners I talk to, so there's a lot of that, ideas gathering, research, and then I get to a point where I think, yeah, I can plot this out. I start plotting, get to a point where I know what the end is, I don't know what the midpoints are, but I start writing anyway. So I tend to start writing and then I build on the plotting. So I am like the complete mix of plotter and pantser. And I wish I was a person who, I know some people write that brilliant first draft that they just get it out, and maybe it isn't the best thing that they've written, but they can do it in a month or something. That's just not me at all. I write a chapter, I think, I need to change that actually, I'm going to edit it. And then I write 5 chapters and I realise I've written myself into a corner, so I go back, and rather than pushing on, I have to go backwards and fix it before I move forward. So that works for me and it's fine. And I think because I tend to get really focused on it, so that process, I think it took me about a year to write Mina and the Undead, but it was really intense because I had so much editing as I went along to do. But I think ultimately, although it's slow, I then had a better book at the end of it that didn't need as much work. How about you, Dawn? Are you plotter, pantser, mixture?
All of the above. I've tried so many different ways. I went through a very bad period of writer's block / depression / medical issues that were hindering writing. And during that period of time, I tried everything. And I actually just finished writing this book that is the product of that period of time.
Oh, yeah.
And
Congratulations.
I ended up, thank you. It was such a big moment. And I actually finished it on a call to some friends. We were doing a writing sprint, so that was interesting. But I have tried, I ended up with this book thinking about it for maybe 6 years and trying to write it for like 4. And then in the end, I just zero drafted it. I just had to put aside my editor mechanic brain, but I have done it all different ways. My usual method of writing is to write, go back and edit, write a bit further, go back and edit, right? So I do end up with a pretty polished first draft. But you know what? Writer's block is intense, and you just have to try different things. Every book is different. And I think the one thing I've learned is you can't rush creativity. You can't force it. Some people feel like they can, but I suspect that if you're a bit like me, then you just have to let it come naturally. Yeah. And it sounds like you're the same.
I am completely. I think the difficult thing is that the book comes from you. It's the sum of your experiences, your creativity, what you want to write, and you have to be in the place to write that. And don't, if you're blocking yourself or is something external blocking you, like the book I'm writing now, I hadn't figured out what time period it was going to be set in, and it just felt really flat to me. And I knew it wasn't a modern book, but I just couldn't work out why. And as soon as I picked the decade, which I'm not going to tell you because it's probably going to change, but for now, I know it's not a decade that is pre-2000s. And as soon as I worked that out, it started to flow, but it took time and it took research. And I looked at all the different decades it could be set in and actually picked one that means a lot to the plot. And I think, I don't know, I've heard there are some people that can pluck it all at one point and it all comes together really seamlessly, but I am not one. And I think, we all get there too.
You might find it happens to you.
Yeah, it could. And I'm sure it changes. I mean, I know the people, like you said, you've written, so many great books that they come to you in different ways, and you try different methods, don't you? And you find what works for you.
Exactly.
But we all get to this point. If it takes you 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 6 months, if you really want to write a book and get it published and go through the process, you know, you can do it, even if you're me and Dawn, who take our time over it.
You know what? I think that tranquility of mind and not worrying about the eyes of the world on you is a really good start. I mean, if you were to give a single bit of advice to someone who's never started, but who really wants it, what would it be? If
I think what you've just said,
advice.
I think what you just said is the advice. Sorry, you just froze for a second, Dawn. I wasn't sure whether you'd finished.
It's okay.
Yeah, so I think the advice is to start and to try and turn off, because I don't know whether other people, I'm sure lots of other people have this voice in their head that questions, is this good enough? Is anyone going to want to read this? Does anyone care? And you've got to kind of set that aside, because the first draft that you write, nobody has to read it if you don't want to. The first draft can be for you. Nobody ever has to read it. So I think try and tune that out. Write what you want to write. And for me, I think it was Laini Taylor, it was a bit of a light bulb moment. She said that with Daughter of Smoke and Bone, she just put everything that she liked into the book. So my first draft of Mina started with a mind map, and I hate mind maps usually, but it worked for me. I think it was called New Orleans Vampire Story at that point, you know, really original. And I put things that I liked about it. So I put the Paris catacombs, like the labyrinth of bones underneath Paris, and I put castles, and I put haunted houses, and I didn't use all of them because some of them would not have fit. But I think if you can write a book that you really want to read, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's cliche because it's true. What do you want to read? And don't think about what's going on, what other people are doing. As long as you're not completely copying somebody, write an authentic and original book, but write what you want to write. And I think when you're ready, getting criticism from other people, although it's scary, that's what pushed me over to the next stage. I think if I'd not done Right Mentor, I wouldn't have found some of my favourite critique partners, for one thing, that I met through that. But I think that now probably 5 or 6 people read this book before it even goes to my agent. And I
hope I'm one.
Yeah, well, if you 7 then, Dawn, you can be added to the list. Well, you get different things from different people. So one of my critique partners, Alison, is amazing at noticing inconsistencies and noticing wording that doesn't flow. And she'll tell me things like, on a previous draft, this line was better. And I look back and I'm like, yes, it was. So I think you will learn things from different people, and you won't agree with everything they say. You won't, like, even with my agent, like, there was an idea that she didn't like, and I could have just done what she said there and then, and it was a great idea to change it. But her idea pushed me on to what I actually ended up putting in the book. So even if you don't agree with criticism, it can be valuable. So yeah, I think, sorry, I just waffled on for quite a long time. But...
No, absolutely. I think, you know, your editors are there to point out what doesn't work.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's a hugely important part. But your editor's there to tell you what doesn't work. It doesn't mean that they have the right idea about what will work, but you should pay attention if people are pointing things out. Earlier we talked about favorite books, and I asked you guys to give me your favorite creepy books in the chat box. I hope you are, because I'm going to be going through and picking some to read. Can you tell me favorite recent reads?
See, this year I've been really bad for reading because I had a baby last February just before lockdown, which has been, like, thank you, the most amazing experience. But
cute.
He is really cute, but he's taken a lot of my time. So promoting this book, editing Mina has been my focus. So reading has taken a bit of a slide. But there've been some great books that have come out this year. So Last One to Die by Cynthia Murphy, I think I've mentioned, was brilliant. If you like that brand of very fast-paced, dark, horror, thriller vibes, that also has an historical element, that was really cool. The Last Girl by Goldie Moldavsky is amazing. I think you would love it, Dawn. That comes out next month, just after mine.
I can't wait.
Which has the most amazing, like, 90s horror movie vibes. I loved that. And a couple more. The Boy I Am by Kitty Kettle, if you'd like a feminist dystopian, which is amazing. That one.
Okay.
And The Girl Who by Andrina Cordani is another one that I'd really recommend, which is a thriller told from different perspectives, and it's just so clever. And I'm not trying not to give too much away, but if you want a clever, tightly plotted thriller, then The Girl Who is a really good one to choose. How about you, Dawn? What have you read this year that has really ticked all of your boxes?
So I've been on deadline for 3 books for what feels like forever. Yeah, it's the first time I'm juggling 3, and it's so good and it's so fun, and I'm finally finding a groove. But I did pick 3 books so far that I've read. I've read more than 3 this year, but 3 that I really love. The first one is coming out in, I think, like 2 weeks. House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland.
I've pre-ordered that.
beautifully creepy about three girls who went missing when they were children, and they turn up, I think, something like a year later, naked, and their appearance has changed, but they are them, and they become these three alluring, mysterious girls. And it's linked to their disappearance. The second one was The Shape of Darkness by Laura Purcell, which is an adult gothic, historical gothic novel, and you should just read anything that Laura Purcell writes because she's amazing. And the third one was You Let Me In by Camilla Bruce, which was recommended to me by Kat Ellis, the YA author, who is fabulous. She's got such a good sense of music and films and books, so hit her up if you need recommendations. You Let Me In is this very odd, left of normal novel about a romance novelist who goes missing, and she leaves her house and her fortune to her niece and nephew, with the proviso that they have to read a manuscript that she left on her desk, which tells the story, the truth behind what happened regarding a murder in their family. So it's very, very good. So tell us, are you working on anything new? I know you are because you've told us, but can you give us more hints?
It's really hard because if I say it, it's one of those things that it just kind of gives everything away. I will say it's written probably more than 30 years in the past. It also has a supernatural element to it. It's hopefully going to be darker. It may even push into adult. I'm figuring out at the minute. The voice feels YA, but the content feels quite dark. So I'm figuring that out at the moment. Multiple perspectives, unreliable narrators are something that I am going to toy with in this one, which I've not really done before. So I'm quite excited because I imagine it takes quite a lot of plotting and knowing what's going to happen. And at the moment, I don't quite know, but I'm working on it. But I have got that feeling like when you feel like it's exciting and I tell people about it and they say, "Oh, can I read it?" And I always think that's a good sign if you feel excited and other people get what you're trying to achieve. So hopefully that will, well, possibly the sequel. I think we'll wait and see how the first book goes, but hopefully there might be a sequel to Mina as well.
I want a sequel. Also, you have to tell me about this other book after this live.
I will.
Cool. I feel so privileged. Well, okay, so you guys, Amy is going to read us an excerpt from Mina, but before that, I'm going to do a quick fire round. And after that, she will answer some of the questions that you guys have left. So, quick fire round.
Okay.
When you're not writing, how do you spend your time?
Reading, visiting castles, visiting graveyards.
Oh, great answer. What was your first job?
An office junior in a law firm. Extremely excited.
Okay. What is your most used emoji?
Oh, the smiley laughy face, which I don't know what it's. The laughing, crying one. Yeah.
Oh, me too. Okay. First place you're going to go when we're out of lockdown.
I'd love to take my baby to a castle. Every time a castle comes on TV, I want this to be something that we do together. And
come to Wales.
Honestly, I love Wales. You've invited me twice now. I feel like that is going to happen. But I just really want to take him.
Kat and I will show you a good time.
Yay! But yeah, I just want to take him to some of the places that I love that I haven't been able to take him to yet. How about you, John? Where are you going to go when lockdown ends? What?
I really want to go out of the country. That'd be nice. Although I do love the country, but I think I'd like to go to the pub. I know that's really boring, but I just really like to go for a pub lunch with some mates. You know, just chat, have some good pub food, and just be in proximity with people, with the noise of people around me.
See, I don't go to pubs that much, but I feel that way about restaurants. I want to eat a meal that somebody else has cooked and sit with friends and have it sit, with closer than 2 meters to somebody that I really like would be really good.
Oh, it's going to be so good. And then I'll probably do that for a week and then go back to my normal hermit routine. Anyway, all right, you guys. So we're going to have an extract from Mina and the Undead now. Let's hope
we are. And I'm going to show you what I've written in my book. I've written slow to myself just to make sure I don't read it too fast. So I'll show you all the insights. So in this scene, Mina has got a job in a horror movie mansion called the Mansion of the Macabre, which has scenes from horror films in it. And she's trying to win over the owner so that she can get a job there and work with her sister. So that's where we are. Luckily, Libby took me to the perfect place to cool off, the meat locker from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. On the way, she laid out what I need to do and not do. Most importantly, if I touched somebody, it was over. Thandy's rules were absolute, though Jared wasn't playing by them yesterday. "Good luck," Libby said from the doorway. "You'll be great." "Thanks," I said. The metal door closed behind her. Cold air pumped in from somewhere and goosebumps prickled on my arms. I studied the plastic hunks of meat and body bags on meat hooks. White wax mimicked fat on the meat, and a rotten, sticky stench came in with the cold. With all of these touches, I saw how this place could get under my skin. I even felt a creeping paranoia that I wasn't alone. That was when I was hit in the back. "My bad, are you okay?" a guy gasped, holding the heavy door that did the damage. "I'm fine," I said, even though my right shoulder ached. It was my fault. I was the genius who stood by a closed door. "I'm Jason," he said, seeming relieved that he hadn't killed me yet. That part came later. He was tall and lanky with curly black hair and a dimpled smile. He held a mask and a realistic chainsaw. "Shouldn't you be in the Friday the 13th room?" I asked, thinking of the hockey mask-wearing killer who shared his name. Thandy wouldn't go for it. He took the mask over his head. The rubbery flesh took my breath away. It looked like shriveled pieces of human skin, held together with thick black stitches. With a mop of brown hair attached to it and his blood-stained shirt, the effect was chilling. I'd better get into position. He hid behind a massive hunk of meat in the corner. It dangled from a hook, turning slowly. When the lights went down, the props were even more believable. I slipped easily into character, excited to prove myself. The door opened with a piercing creak. Della bobbed up behind the group with a quick thumbs up, and I held back a grin. This time she came to support me. As instructed, I ignored Libby and targeted a girl at the front of the group. Her hair was blow-dried for Rachel, and she had Jennifer Aniston's poise to go with it. "Please, help me," I gasped. "Did you see him?" "Him who?" she asked, flipping her hair. She put on a good front, but her gaze flitted between the fake meat and plastic-wrapped bodies suspended from very real meat hooks. With a gurgling howl, Jason leapt out, and my ear-busting scream rivaled the roar of his chainsaw. Chaos tore the group apart. Libby had told me to lead them towards the exit while she herded from the sides, but it was a challenge. We had to push between the body bags and hunks of meat. The rotten meat stench was so thick that my skin felt scaled with it. I forced my bare shoulder between two body bags, static rippling over my skin. All around me was slack face and dead eyes captured behind the clear plastic. The shrieking horde pushed from behind. Their exhilaration fed mine. When the gauntlet was over, I sagged to one side as the crowd rushed past, squealing and elated. Della slowed down to whisper, "Good job, girl." Libby jogged past, sparing me a wink before she led the screaming group into the next room. As soon as the door shut, Jason sprang up. Adrenaline flared and my hands made fists. God, that mask was realistic. I once read about a murderer called Ed Guy and the inspiration for Silence of the Lambs. He stitched fragments of human skin together to make gloves, a lampshade, and even a dress for his mother. Jason whipped the mask off and his skin glistened with sweat. He was so smiley that my fingers unclenched. "You did good. I'll be sure to tell Thandy. I've got to help out with the Chucky tech. Do you need me to get to another room?" "No, that's it for me." I had a strong desire to put on shoes and shorts. "I need to find Heather." Taking the stairs two at a time, I fantasized about getting paid to do this if Thandy approved of my performance. The landing was quiet, with everyone playing their roles on the tour. I heard shrieks and relieved laughter from somewhere on this floor. Heather wasn't in the hallway, so I tried the changing rooms. Both sides were empty. I was planning to change out of the dress when I heard quiet footsteps. By the time I got into the hallway, no one was there. From this angle, I was facing up a steep flight of stairs, with an open door at the top. It was hard to pinpoint what made me go up there. I had to find Heather, and she could have been upstairs. I also relished the prospect of exploring the mansion. There was a spot of blood on the second stair, a glossy jewel that was still wet and crimson on the grey carpet. If I'd been anywhere else, I would have guessed someone had a nosebleed or sliced their hand on a prop. Since this was the mansion, Thandy was probably working on a new room. I didn't really expect to find Heather up there, but it gave me a good excuse to snoop around. Further up the stairs, there was more blood, a splash this time. I brushed off the touch of doubt and went on. That was when I saw the pool of blood at the top of the stairs. I'm going to stop that.
I want you to keep going.
Thank you. I feel like if you liked that, then you'll probably like the book, because I try to play with fake scares and real scares in the book, and I think that scene does have a little bit of that in. So
it's so good. I remember that scene vividly. You write in a really cinematic way. I hope they buy this for a TV series or for a film, and then they make it like a 90s film. That would be beautiful. All right, we have some time for questions. Only 6 minutes left. That flew by. So, okay. Marissa Noel asks, okay, Snog, kill, marry, which vampires?
Okay. Oh, so I have to choose.
Yeah.
Oh, God, this is horrible. Marissa,
okay, I'll choose for you. For you. Spike, Lestat, and the main guy from Lost Boys, I forget his name.
Oh, which one, Michael or the...
Yes, Michael.
Okay, I would marry Michael, so that's easy because I won't spoil things, but I feel like you could live with the guy. This is horrible, but I might have to snog Spike and kill Lestat. I'm sorry, I really like Spike.
I love it.
How about you, Dawn? I want you to do it. What are your answers for those three?
For the same? Okay, I'd kill Michael. I'd marry Lestat because he'd be fun. And I'd kiss Spike.
Would he be fun, or would he kill you in your sleep?
I need a female vampire that I can answer that with, because then I'd probably marry her. All right, so Shelley asks, if you could take one character out of Mina and the Undead and put them in a point horror, who would it be? What a great question.
That is an excellent question. I think Della would be a really good point horror girl, because some of the point horror girls are a little bit passive, and I don't know whether it's because it was the early 90s, and I don't know, there just seemed to be a thing that the main characters had things happen to them, and I think Della would be great because she would do things and she would have agency, and she is a very, trying to word this in a way that isn't spoilery, she would be able to defend herself. I'll say that.
Yeah, she's capable.
Yes, that's a good word. I'll remember that one. Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you.
Well, Lucy asks, did you get any resistance from publishers or agents when you decided to set your book in the past / another country?
That's a really good question. The past, no. The other country, I think people really wanted me to justify why, because obviously I'm not from there, and I was mindful that I didn't want to write as a girl from New Orleans about life in the city, because I think that's a story that somebody else could tell, and, you know, and should. It's not a story for me. I loved going to New Orleans as a visitor, and I wanted to write a book about that sense of wonder of being in a new place. And I think YA is the perfect place to do that, because you've got characters who are figuring out who they are and finding their feet as people. And I think seeing somebody in an unfamiliar and often uncomfortable setting is a really good way to test who they are. So yeah, that's why I went for another country. So I think that I felt needed a little bit of justification, but it was just checking that it was my story to tell. I think that was the important part.
It felt authentic because she was a visitor. You know, I felt like I was going there with her. I love that so much.
Good, thank you.
Colette wants to know, what's the trickiest part about writing a YA point horror style book?
I think keeping all the threads of the plot going, because as you read my book, you'll realise there are a few twists, and I don't think it's too spoilery to say that, because there are enough of them to hopefully keep you guessing. There isn't just the one big twist at the end. And I wanted to make sure that because I was writing that way, I didn't want it just to be a big shock. I always feel a bit cheated if there's a twist and it came from absolutely nowhere, that if you thought back through the book, you just don't know why it happened. So I think that following my plot threads, I had to physically write the whole plot of the book out and then mark the threads and follow them to make sure that I'd flagged some things, I'd planted some red herrings, I'd planted clues, and I think that is quite hard to pull it all together into a cohesive whole.
Yeah, agreed. I have experienced that. Oh dear. It's like a brain exercise. It stretches the grey matter.
It is,
well,
and
Emma
sometimes
wants
you think
to know
you've got
if
it.
you could have vampire, provided that you're not on the menu. Sorry, you froze. I don't know if I was talking over you.
Yeah, you did too. I'm sorry. I think we did the same. Do you mind saying the question again? Because we both froze.
Yeah, sure. So Emma wants to know, if you could have dinner with one fictional vampire, provided that you are not on the menu, who would it be and why?
I would choose Eric from True Blood, because I like the fact that he is a vampire who, at the beginning, he doesn't seem to have that much substance, and you're introduced to him in a really gory scene where he kills somebody. And then the series it spends a lot of time unpicking him as a character, and I haven't read the books very far to know if this happens, but I think the joy of vampires is that they kind of live for a really long time, and a lot of experiences have shaped them in a way that a human lifespan can't have. So I think meeting a really old vampire would be interesting, because you could find out about all the periods through history and what made them who they are, as long as there's a guarantee of no biting, because I'm pretty sure he would.
And provided that their memory is supernatural as well, because I forget what I had for breakfast in the morning.
So. True. That's really good.
So, yeah, that was really good. Okay, so Cynthia asks, well, she wants you to rename Mina point horror style, which I think is awesome.
Oh gosh, she'd be called something like Trixie, or nothing against that name. I just think that she would. Something that sounds like you could call a puppy it, probably. And she would wear so think of like a girl puppy name, and that probably would be a point horror girl. And can I talk about her clothes as well? She'd be wearing leggings that would be a different colour from her oversized jumper, and it would be described in great length, and her eyes would be an implausible colour like violet or lapis lazuli blue or something like that. So yeah, the name is tricky. Definitely. Yes. Yeah. Golden eyes with flecks of grey or something. Yeah.
Twinkled in the sunlight.
Yeah, I'm not good at the naming part, but I think the description I could do pretty well.
You know, it actually sounds kind of fun to do some kind of short story with all the point horror tropes. All right, Laura wants to know, with which character would you most likely be friends?
I think Mina turned into not exactly me, but she had lots of my characteristics, and maybe we'd annoy each other because we're similar, but I think she's quite apt to step into danger, and her curiosity lands her in trouble. And I think that she could be quite interesting for that reason, that she would kind of push your boundaries and your comfort zone. And I think she'd be an interesting friend. And we could watch vampire films and read books together and discuss them at great length, because I love it when I meet somebody that I can do that with.
Oh, I know, me too. We're going to hang out. Colette wants to know, what is your favorite book genre to read other than horror?
Oh, that's really good, because it changes. And I'm going through a patch at the minute where I'm not reading much fantasy yet. If you'd asked me probably 10 years ago, I'd have said fantasy is all I read. I do like a really tightly plotted thriller that is 300 pages and not a word is spared. And I feel like you hold your breath for the chapter, and then at the end, you let out a breath you didn't know you were holding, maybe, if we're talking about YA. I think thriller probably is something. I also like contemporary quite often as a bit of a palate cleanser between all the horror. I do sometimes just step into like something like Simon James Green is amazing at writing these really believable teenage characters, or Beth Garrett. Laura Wood also writes amazing like historical romantic fiction. So I think I'd say thriller, but with a side of contemporary for a bit of variety.
I love that. Well, we are actually 2 minutes past time.
We do like to talk, Dawn.
That was so much fun. And we're so natterers, aren't we? We love a chin wag. Well, this was awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming. I hope you have seen the winners of the giveaway. They should be in the chat there somewhere.
I think you can sort it, if not, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I'm sure that they'll email you or message you or whatever. Thank you guys for coming so much. This has been a blast. Congratulations, Amy, on the publication of Mina. It's such a good book.
Thank
and let's pray for a sequel.
Thank you, I will. And thank you so much, Dawn, for hosting. Thank you to everybody who's watched. I'm going to end the broadcast now, but I'll pop on Twitter later and answer some of the questions, because I think there were some really good ones in there. So yeah, thank you, everybody, and hopefully see you on social media. Bye. Thank you. Bye.